Super excited to see you all. Thank you all for taking the time and coming to Billund to make this effort, or to join us in this exciting product launch. As you said, my name's Mike Anderson. I'm a creative director here at Lego House for fans playing with Lego and visiting Lego House. Earlier releases have included
section, but actually I'd like to start with a story. I've written this story. It's 400 chapters. It'll take about 3 hours. It's a very short little story. So I'd like to read that to you now. And are you all sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. It was a beautiful spring day in Fabuland, and Edward Elephant was out in his garden. "Good morning, Edward. Looks like I have a very important letter for you all the way from Denmark," said Boris Baldock, as he's out delivering the Fabuland post. "Goodness," Edward exclaimed as he opened the letter. Just at that moment, Joe Crow walked past. "Hello, Edward, how are you?" "I'm very excited," he said with a huge grin. "Oh, really, Edward? Why is that?" "Look at this. We've just received an invitation from Lego House in Billund, Denmark, to come and perform with our Fabuland band to celebrate the launch of their new exclusive Lego House set." "Wow, that's amazing," said Joe. "That really is quite an honour." "It is," replied Edward, and then he looked sad. "You don't look very happy, Edward. Is something wrong?" said Dr. Lucy Lamb, who just happened to be passing by on her morning rounds. "Well," explained Edward, "our Fabuland band has been invited to perform at Lego House, but I don't know how we can all get to Denmark." Joe Crow burst out laughing and said, "Edward, we can all fly there in my aeroplane." "Woohoo, yes, you're right," cried Edward, looking a lot happier as a big grin returned to his face. "Can I come too?" said a familiar voice from behind the tree, where Clive Crocodile was listening in on the conversation. "Of course, Clive," said Joe. "The more the merrier. And don't forget to all bring your instruments. We really must take a photo when we get there to share with everyone in Fabuland. It's going to be a fabulous day out at home of the brick," declared Edward, and all his friends nodded in agreement. Are you all still awake? Has anybody been living under a rock for the last 10 weeks or so? So, let's take a look at it. We have Fabuland Tribute, set number 40506, 2025, and there's a great background to this theme, and I would actually like to invite to the stage Sina now, who will tell us a little bit about the history of Lego Fabuland.
Yes, and I have sound as well. That's cool. So, my name is Sina, and I am one of the corporate historians with the Lego Group, and quite a while ago I was asked to assist on this project, which I was pretty happy with, because Fabuland just happens to be my favorite absolute theme when I was a child, so that was a bit of a passion project for me. So just to sort of talk a bit about what I will be going through, because this is, I'm a historian, so you'll get the history lesson now. I will be talking a bit about the introduction of roleplay in Lego products. Entirely made out of Lego bricks. Pretty cool, but also maybe just a bit too big. That was 74. Then, oh, well, we're skipping a part here, so I'll go back to that. So that's 77. That's just to say that we, of course, also did figures with Duplo. Very simple figure. Then we're moving back a bit, because that was the one I wanted to show you guys first. 1975, we introduced a static figure. This one you probably also know, it's smaller. The size is more like a minifigure, but as you can also see, we couldn't figure out how to do arms and legs and face. Not that important, right? But still. And then, of course, came these guys, 1978, the minifigure. And that's sort of the evolution of the types of figures we've been doing. And that is sort of what is leading up to the Fabuland figures, which then came out with the product line in 1979. So that was just to give you a bit of understanding of that. Now, to talk a bit about the concept and the original idea, looking that it was this very sort of homogenic product line of very products that were sort of fitting together. Yes. Then, also because we are the Lego group, so we did a ton of testing because we wanted to make sure that children liked this new product line, and that is the figures. The figures, they stand apart from. Just to give you a few examples, there's Dr. Lucy Land, for instance, who is a wonderful doctor, always cheerful and sympathetic, and always ready with a friendly word, and so on and so on. And they are super detailed, all of these bios here, and I've just chosen a few. They just so happen to be on this image. There is, for instance, the broom. That one was developed for Fabuland in 1982. And that is the same broom as Harry Potter has been flying around on. And then we have the pot, as you can see on the bottom. That is from also 1982. Oh, sorry. Whoa. Hang on. There we go. 1982. And then there is this, again, pretty iconic product element, which is the white bread. 1985. Baked for the first time, I think it was 1985 or 1985.
So I was actually looking at the different accessories, and it's the accessories which actually define the story, if you like. It's those components that you can build a story on. So I was actually consulting a lot with Marcus about what kind of accessories did he think we should use in this set. I actually started off looking at like the scooter, and then the vacuum cleaner was one of my favourite elements. I really wanted to do the vacuum cleaner, which is kind of surprising when you see the state of my home. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with the vacuum cleaner. Clearly, I have no idea how they work. But so I really wanted to build a story on some of these components. But having a conversation with Marcus, he suggested that we did the accordion as being one of his elements he would like to see in there. And that got me thinking, so if we did the accordion, maybe we could make a kind of band. We could put a different musical instrument with each of the characters and create some kind of story based on them performing as a band together. So I still tried to get Edward in with the vacuum cleaner in the band, but it wasn't quite working, and the story was going to be super odd. So decided to actually make Edward actually the conductor of the band there, and that's what he would be doing there. So we actually ended up making a slightly different arrangement. What I also didn't know was how many figures we would be able to get into the box. So that's what I hand over to Marcus, and of course, it's at this point that Marcus is then in the driving seat, and he's the one that then leads the development of the set. So this is normally the point where I hand over to Marcus, and of course, as is tradition, this is the point where Marcus throws me under the bus.
No, I mean, of course it's joking, but Stuart doesn't have to take care of this stuff. Like, this is where I come in as a Lego designer that has to look at all these little things and challenges that we possibly might want to fix before we put this in a shiny little box with building instructions, all that stuff. As you can see, this product is very simply divided into three things. You have the characters. You have characters like Joe, Edward, Lucy, and Clive. Then you have the space that holds everything together. And then, of course, we wanted to pay tribute to the iconic Fabuland tree, which I've also seen in secondhand stores. I don't own one, unfortunately, as fun as they are. We are mainly focusing on the tree today and on the character because the base is just there to tie everything together. And to start with it all, we're going to talk about the tree. The tree is an interesting problem because it is a flat Lego element that we had to upscale. But as such, we wanted to, of course, make sure that the proportions are the same. All the characters and the tree are basically about twice the size of the original, meaning we had to also kind of stay in that scale. This is the one that Stuart started with, and I think it's a very decent representation of what you would do if you weren't able to spend time on it. Let's be honest. Once you spend multiple months on fine-tuning this tree, you come up with a lot of different ways of doing it. And I'm going to run you through all the different versions that I came up with just to make sure that we hit the tree in the right way, but then also that we actually end up with a tree that is actually easy to build and is also decodable in our building instructions, which means we also have to pay attention to things like similar elements. It all being green is not easy to solve because, of course, it needs to be green. But can you then find the elements on the table? Things like that. So we started off with Stuart's tree and made notes. There's no studs on the original tree, but also there's like a lot of like tiled surface on the top. So can we get a better balance there? Can we match the original tree better? The proportions are kind of off. The original tree is very asymmetrical. You can see the top left corner is slightly bigger. There's an uneven number of like curves, all these fun little problems. So we started out with this, and then we did this. And this is basically just me throwing together shapes to see what fits. The problem with this tree is it has to be an uneven number of studs to be 100% correct, which we know is not easy. So we tried a few more things. This is just me throwing stuff in a digital program because it's quicker. Like, there was no point building this because it was not possible. Because we came to things like this, where you have the center ring being offset in all directions, which I think I spent a whole day on figuring out if this is even possible. It turns out it's not. So we abandoned that. Because the interesting issue, like how I arrived with this, is actually that if you look at the original tree, the circles are the same distance apart from one another, each of those circles. And I was just really intrigued by that, but yeah, we abandoned that. Then we looked at building it sideways, because very often it turns out problems get solved very easily when you change the building direction. Not in this case, but it was worth a try, I think. I really enjoyed messing around with these bows and trying to get a few different shapes going, but ultimately this just resulted in a very messy, complicated build with lots of horizontal offsets, with like side builds that just didn't feel good. And also I couldn't make it work nicely. So we went back to this. And this is basically the final tree, where we just ended up shifting a few elements around. This is like not 100% like a carbon copy of what the original tree would be, but it's close enough. It hits all the right marks. Just the real tree as a comparison. It has like these offsets, but it's also still very recognizable Lego. Lots of studs. But it's also, and I think that's what I'm very happy with, it's very simple to build. Because you start with these big elements, it's very symmetrical, and you just build it up one after another on these like half circles. And with that, we just made sure that you can actually build this. Like you build the top first, then you attach the trunk, then you build it sideways on the base, and then you're done. Very simple way to solve a very complicated tree that doesn't look complicated at all. So they had to be interchangeable, which also meant that the accordion has to be in the same system as the tuba or the drum. Whatever they were holding should be shareable. So those were the little tricky components that I started out with. How can we solve these so all the figures, all the accessories work together with one another? And then I had a few more notes, like I always do with Stuart. The head is built in all directions. We already know that some of these don't work. So we can right away kill these guys, because they were in Stuart's initial sketch and they broke. We tried all of this stuff, like any kind of connection that has bars or clips, just doesn't hold up. And then we end up with these guys in Technic. The problem is they're color-coded. You don't want a black like snap or something sticking out on the hips of a otherwise gray elephant. And they're also just very hard to build in, so I killed those. And then basically by process of elimination, you end up with click hinges. As a Lego designer, I like and I hate click hinges because they are very easy to build in, but they only come in very limited directions. These plates only come in this configuration. They only come with a straight hinge, and the bricks come with a horizontal one, but they're hard to build in. They're great though because they can hold their poses and they're very satisfying to rotate. So we started with the rocker hinges, then we went to clips, then we went to click hinges, and now we ended up with different building directions. This actually makes the build quite interesting, I think. And we want to remove the hand notation. So I first simplified them because I think there is always a good step to just like look at the final design you want to achieve. The arms are very round, so I started with a round shoulder design. But of course, it's the same shoulder connection. It's a single stud. It won't actually hold very much. But it got us in the right direction. But of course, these arms won't hold. I went once again to 318 connectors, to this presser plate in this case, where there was a round plate with a hole, just to get more stability and like rotational friction, I guess. But then we ended up in an interesting issue where, as you can see, the T-rod was already done, which also took a couple weeks. But if you now started rotating the shoulders, over time, the 318 bar basically eases itself out of the rotation, out of the whole versions that Stuart had made. One used a very nifty trick to get a cross-axle hole in the top, but it didn't go anywhere. And then, the different hinges, and then finally, and the crew is very happy about it. You can also see it's roughly twice the height. So I think we were quite happy with where we ended up here. But the characters wouldn't be the characters without their heads. This is the initial design that Stuart came up with, because Stuart doesn't have to care about that. Lucky guy. Clive, I think, needed a bit more separation in the scales, just a bit more 3D look there. And Lucy, on the other hand, needed to be smoother, because the design for Lucy's head in the actual Fabuland figure is very smooth. I killed the trunk element. But that was actually a very conscious choice. We found that when I had these on my desk and I had colleagues stopping by, my colleagues are very opinionated. And that's a good thing, because every single person was like, oh, I love Lucy, and I love Joe, and he's very recognizable. But every single person kept commenting on Edward. And every single thing they came up with for Edward's trunk just didn't feel right. And I also gave him a little funny pink brain, because I like that. But essentially, we come from the left side, the very left one is Stuart's version, and then you can see the final design on the right, where it's just a bit bigger, a bit more shaped, I think. So anyway, if we're looking at the top and the bottom, the top is the original designs, the bottom is what I tweaked them into. You can see that I kept them fairly close to what they are. The T-rod changed probably the most, because it went from a completely technical build to a system build, but it tried to keep has a few, compromises, but we still managed to get the different details in, the little half circle that sticks out on the top, or the little, I don't even know what they're called, the round things on the front.
Things out. And in November 23, I think we employed somebody called Didak, who is our associate master builder. Didak comes from the world of graphic design, he's a very talented designer, graphic designer, and illustrator. So we actually asked Didak, who sits in the team doing basically the same job that I'm doing, if he would be interested in doing all the illustrations for this new Fabuland set that we're working on. There's a very distinct style to the illustrations, and we also did the illustration for the box art there, as well as the illustration for the storybook that you saw earlier on there.
Thank you very much.